At 18, my stepmom dumped her baby on me, then spread falsehoods I forced her out, and my dad banished me. What if the person who stole your childhood came back years later, demanding an inheritance they never earned, only to find you'd already outsmarted them? The look on her face. Priceless. The air in our house, even before she arrived, felt thick with the kind of tension that made you hold your breath. It was a suffocating quiet, punctuated only by my parents' endless, whispered arguments, the same ones, over and over, about money, about dreams that never came true. A pressure cooker, slowly simmering. My name is Elijah. I'm 23, working in cybersecurity and raising my half-brother, Leo. People assume that means I grew up stable. I didn't. Most of what shaped me happened before I turned 10, in a home that felt more like a battlefield. My parents fought constantly. About money. Chores. Pure disappointment. I learned early that staying quiet kept me out of the blast zone. My mother eventually checked out altogether, lying on the couch for hours, snapping if I asked if she was okay. Later diagnosis explained some of it, but by then, I'd already learned to take care of myself. When my parents divorced, I felt lighter, even if I couldn't say so out loud. Everyone expected me to fall apart. I just wanted to go to school the next day. That reaction, that need for normalcy, followed me for years. My dad, David, got full custody. He was kind, but conflict avoidant to a fault. If someone raised their voice, he folded. We lived in a cramped apartment for a while, then eventually moved to a better neighborhood when I was about 12. That's when he met Serafina. She lived a few houses down, always walking her dog like she was waiting to be approached. She introduced herself with a stage-ready smile and told my dad she loved kids. But the way she looked at me felt more like an assessment. Within a week, she was commenting on how quiet and hard to read I was. Always to him, never to me. She became a permanent fixture fast. First evenings, then weekends, then long stretches where she simply didn't go home. By 16, she moved in outright, treating the house like something she'd bought. She rearranged rooms, boxed my things without asking, and created household routines. Routines she never followed herself. My dad, desperate for peace, agreed to everything. When she started living with us full-time, she made it clear she wasn't joining our household. She was taking charge of it. She'd stand in doorways like an inspector, suggesting new rules and criticizing whatever I did. I'd learned not to push back, but I noticed every double standard. Looking back, that was the real beginning. The point where she stopped pretending to fit into our lives and started shaping them around herself. I was 16 when Serafina made it brutally clear she wasn't living with us, she was taking over. The first morning after she moved in, she stood in my doorway, arms crossed, scanning the room like a landlord inspecting a rental. "This room is perfect for Luna," she said, naming her dog. "She needs her own space. She's very sensitive." I was sitting on the edge of my bed, tying my shoes. "That's my room," I said quietly. She didn't even look at me. "Your dad and I will figure something out." David stepped behind her, rubbing the back of his neck. "Serafina, come on. Elijah needs his space." She turned to him with this slow, disappointed stare. "I thought you wanted us to build a real home together. I guess I misread things." He froze. That was all it took. One guilt trip and he caved. The next day, he came downstairs while I was grabbing my backpack. "Eli, the basement isn't that bad. We can fix it up together. Make it like a project." I nodded because disagreeing would only stretch the moment out. "Sure, whatever you want." Serafina walked by holding her dog, her voice bright and fake. "Thank you for being flexible, Elijah. This will be good for everyone." Moving into the basement felt less like a project and more like a punishment. It had concrete floors, exposed pipes, and a single flickering bulb. Serafina didn't bother hiding how satisfied she was. She carried Luna into my old room like it was some victory parade. A few days later, she introduced something new. A whiteboard hung near the kitchen with a title written in bubble letters, Household Contribution System. "We're implementing a point system," she announced. "It'll teach structure." She pointed to the board. My name was the only one on it. David blinked. "Points for what exactly?" "For access," she said simply. "Laundry, kitchen use, anything shared. Elijah needs clear expectations." I stared at the board. "I already did all the chores." She shrugged. "Now you'll earn credit for them. It's motivational." That night when I heated leftovers, she appeared behind me like she'd been waiting for the moment. "You didn't earn enough points today," she said. "That's for people contributing." "I took out the trash and cleaned the bathroom," I said. She walked over to the board and tapped it. "A half-cleaned bathroom isn't a full contribution." David came into the kitchen, rubbing his eyes. "Eli, just play along for now. Serafina's trying to help." "I'm hungry," I said, my voice tight. Serafina stepped between us. "You always feel entitled to things, don't you? Your dad pays for that food." When guests came over, she made sure they heard her version of me. "He's very withdrawn, hard to work with. We're trying to teach him responsibility." After the third time, she told a story about me that didn't match reality. I started keeping receipts quietly. Notes, dates. Eventually, cheap little security cameras I paid for myself. David never corrected her. Not once. "Eli, just don't provoke her," he'd whisper. "She's been stressed lately." "I'm not provoking anyone," I'd say. He'd sigh. "Just go with it, please." I tried playing by her rules for about a week. I scrubbed the kitchen. She inspected it and wiped one finger across a counter. "Oh," she said, "guess we'll have to dock points. If I can see dust, it doesn't count." No matter what I did, she erased points or added new rules. It was obvious. The goal wasn't to make me responsible. It was to make me feel like nothing I did counted. So I shifted. I stopped trying to earn her approval and focused on not being home. After school, I took extra shifts at the machine shop. Arthur, the supervisor, watched me show up more often. One evening, he handed me a pair of new gloves and said, "Basement living still going on?" I nodded. "Pretty much." He leaned on the workbench. "You saving anything?" "A little." "Save more," he said. "Don't tell anyone what you've got. Some houses don't get better. You just age out of them." It wasn't emotional advice. It was practical, the kind I actually needed. By the time I was 17, my dad made it official. Courthouse wedding. No celebration. Just paperwork, rings, and Serafina smiling like she'd finally locked the door behind her. Serafina announced she was pregnant on a Thursday morning. I was grabbing my boots for school when she said, "We're expecting." "Isn't that wonderful?" Her voice had this rehearsed cheerfulness, and she kept her eyes fixed on David, not me. David looked shocked but happy. "Really? That's... Wow, Serafina, that's amazing." She placed a hand on her stomach like she was already posing for a picture. "This changes everything. We need to make sure the house is ready." She didn't say, "we," as in all of us. She meant everyone else needed to adjust around her. From that moment, everything revolved around her pregnancy. The living room filled with magazines, swatches, furniture samples, and baby product catalogs. She talked non-stop about creating a nurturing space. And each day, she added another item to the list. Crib. Dresser. Special lighting. Themed wallpaper. A custom rug. Nothing was standard. Everything had to be top-end. David tried to keep up, but I heard the strain in his voice. One night, he said, "Serafina, maybe we should budget this a bit. Some of this is a lot." She crossed her arms. "So, you don't want our child to have the best. Your salary is already stretched. I can't do everything on my own." She turned to me next. "And Elijah is old enough to contribute. A second job wouldn't kill him." I blinked. "I already work after school." "Yes," she said. "But that money goes toward your things. This is a family expense." David looked defeated already. "Eli, maybe take on a few more shifts just until we get through this." I didn't argue. Arguing changed nothing. "Sure," I said. "I'll talk to Arthur." When I mentioned it at the machine shop, Arthur just nodded. "Extra hours? I can work you in. You good with that?" "Yeah," I said. "Need the money." He handed me a clipboard. "Clock in whenever you can, but don't bury yourself." I appreciated the warning, even if I didn't listen to it. A week later, Serafina's parents arrived with suitcases and attitudes. They claimed they were there to support the household during this special time, but they treated the place like their property. Her mother walked into the basement on day one and said, "My goodness, still living down here. No wonder he's so strange." Her father inspected the kitchen and asked, "Elijah, do you even know how to clean this properly? Doesn't look like it." Whenever I stayed quiet, they made comments. "Why doesn't he answer? He's always like this. Maybe it's a behavioral issue." Serafina never corrected them. She encouraged it. David tried to keep peace by staying out of every conversation. When her parents said something rude, he'd just glance at me with an apologetic, powerless expression. One night, I asked, "Dad, can you talk to them?" He sighed immediately. "Eli, it's only temporary. Please don't start anything." That was the moment I knew he wouldn't protect me anymore. The nursery project became their group hobby. They took over my weekends with mandatory helping sessions. I patched holes, sanded walls, assembled furniture, carried boxes, lifted shelving, all while listening to Serafina's mother critique everything. "That's crooked. You're not strong enough to hold it straight. Stop rushing, Elijah." I wasn't rushing. Her father was the one drilling holes in the wrong places. But whenever something went wrong, they turned to me. Serafina floated through the mess like a supervisor. "Be careful with the crib, Elijah. That cost more than your car will." I didn't even own a car. Money became the constant topic. One night, Serafina spread receipts across the dining table. "David, we're already exceeding the budget. Your salary is maxed out. We need additional income." David rubbed his forehead. "I'm trying, Serafina. I'm taking all the overtime I can." She pointed at me without looking at me. "Elijah needs to step up. Your son is nearly an adult. He should contribute." "I am contributing," I said quietly. She waved her hand. "Not enough." Her parents nodded like an audience trained to agree. After they finally finished the nursery, her parents moved out. They didn't thank anyone. They just left instructions taped to the wall about how things should be maintained. The house didn't feel quieter without them. It felt emptier in a different way, like David and I were the unpaid staff, and Serafina was the manager waiting to critique our performance. I stopped asking David for backup or explanations. There was no point. Every time he tried to help, he folded under Serafina's pressure. I didn't resent him. I just accepted who he was. So, I shifted gears. I opened a separate bank account. I saved every dollar Arthur gave me. I stopped keeping important papers in the basement and stored them in a locked box at the machine shop. I kept my laptop and personal things in my backpack wherever I went. Anything I didn't want Serafina touching stayed off-site. Arthur noticed one day when he saw the box. He tapped it with a wrench. Planning something? Just being careful, I said. He nodded. Good. Always know where your exits are. I didn't smile, but I knew exactly what he meant. By the time Serafina reached the 8th month of pregnancy, I had enough money saved that I didn't feel trapped anymore. I still lived in the basement, still earned points, still did chores, still dealt with her comments, but mentally, I was already out the door. All I needed was the right moment, and it was coming faster than any of us expected. Leo was born on a Friday afternoon. The delivery room was crowded with nurses, machines, and Serafina acting like she was directing a show. She kept saying things like, "I'm so strong." And, "This is what real motherhood looks like." Every time someone offered help, she waved them away dramatically. But once we got home, the performance faded fast. She barely touched Leo unless someone was watching. When friends visited, she held him close and said, "He's my whole world." As soon as the door closed, she'd hand him to David and say, "He's fussy. You deal with it." David handled the night feedings, diaper changes, baths, everything. He tried to hide how tired he was, but the dark circles under his eyes gave it away. I offered to help sometimes, but Serafina always intercepted. "No, Elijah," she'd say, stepping between me and the baby. "You're too rough. You don't have the right energy." So, I stayed in the basement listening to Leo cry through the vents while David walked laps around the living room at 2 o'clock in the morning. Around the 4-month mark, David mentioned a fishing trip he'd been invited to by some coworkers. "It's only 3 days, he told Serafina. "Just a short thing. I haven't had a break in months." She shrugged. "Do whatever you want." Even I knew that tone wasn't approval. It was a setup. But David chose to hear permission. On the morning he left, I was eating toast when Serafina came downstairs with a duffel bag. "Where are you going?" I asked. She zipped the bag aggressively. "My mother's. I need support. This house is draining me." "What about Leo?" I asked, a knot forming in my stomach. She gave me a flat look. "You can handle it." "I'm 18, I said. "And you're not a child. Stop acting helpless." She picked up Leo's carrier, placed him on the couch, and walked out the door. "Don't call unless it's life or death." She didn't even wait to see if I picked him up. Once I heard her car pull away, I exhaled and grabbed Leo. He was already crying. I checked his diaper, warmed a bottle, and started a routine. I treated it like a job and broke it into steps. Feed. Burp. Change. Settle. I moved everything I needed into the basement because I didn't want to roam the house more than necessary. I didn't touch the cameras. I left them exactly where they were. Quiet, blinking, and recording. If Serafina tried to rewrite what happened, I wanted the house itself to disagree with her. I kept a notebook, too. Times. Feedings. Fussiness. Sleep. I wrote down everything. Leo wasn't difficult. He just needed consistency, and once he got it, he calmed down. By the second night, I was exhausted, but he was stable. The basement felt crowded, but at least it was controlled. I slept in 2-hour stretches between his cries. Serafina didn't call. Not once. On the 3rd day, I was sitting on the floor with Leo on my chest when I heard the front door open. David's voice echoed down the stairs. "Eli, you down there?" "Yeah," I said, standing up slowly, carefully. He came down the steps and froze at the sight, bottles lined up, diapers stacked, a blanket on the concrete floor where I'd been sitting with Leo. "What happened?" he asked, eyes wide, confused. "Where's Serafina?" "She left the morning you did," I said. "Went to her mom's. Left you here alone with him?" His voice cracked with disbelief. Yeah, 72 hours, I said. Here's the log. I handed him the notebook. And the cameras are still running, I added. If you want proof, it's all there. He flipped through it, stunned, a slow dawning horror on his face. Eli, this is. The front door slammed upstairs. Serafina's voice cut through the house, shrill and demanding. David, are you home? She stomped down the stairs, saw Leo in my arms, and immediately launched into a performance. I came back early because I was terrified. I couldn't stay there another minute after what he did. What I did? I repeated, incredulous. She pointed at me, shaking with manufactured rage. Yes, you. You cornered me emotionally. Your presence is dark and hostile. I feared for my life, David. I had to leave. David blinked, confused, looking between us. Serafina, what are you talking about? Eli took care of him for 3 days. She scoffed. Of course he'll say that. He forced me to go. He's been unstable for months. Here we go, I muttered under my breath. Don't talk back to me, she snapped. You create tension in this house. You always have. David looked between us, panicking the way he did during every conflict. Eli, maybe just, apologize. Let's de-escalate. For what? I asked, my blood running cold. For upsetting her, he said quietly, avoiding my gaze. We can't start a war over this. Just apologize so we can move forward. Serafina folded her arms like she'd won. Exactly. Take responsibility, Elijah. I handed Leo to David, my movements slow and deliberate, and grabbed my backpack. You're leaving? David asked, his voice a desperate plea. You told me to apologize for taking care of your kid, I said. I think that tells me everything I need to know. Eli, wait. No, I said, cutting him off. You asked me to go. I walked through the house and took the cameras down one by one, careful and methodical like I was collecting evidence from a crime scene. Then I packed them, shouldered my backpack, and walked out the front door while Serafina hovered behind David, already whispering something venomous to him. I didn't slam the door. I didn't shout. I just left. With the footage, the logs, and the cold, hard certainty that I wasn't coming back. And even though I didn't know it yet, everything I did in those 72 hours would end up saving Leo's future. By 23, my life was predictable in the best way. I had a steady cybersecurity job, a one-room apartment, and a routine built from years of working full-time, studying at community college at night and stacking certifications. Arthur had gotten me into stable housing years earlier and stayed one of the few people I trusted. Life was quiet, and I kept it that way. One night, just after midnight, someone knocked on my door. Nobody ever knocked. When I checked the peephole, I froze. It was David. He looked older than 50, thin, pale, unsteady. When I opened the door, he tried to smile, a weak, broken thing. Hey, Eli. I stepped aside, opening the way. Come in. He moved slowly toward the couch, gripping the wall for balance. When he sat down, his hands shook uncontrollably. I need to say something, he said, his voice raspy. And I don't want you to stop me. He took a deep, shuddering breath. I'm sorry. For everything. For letting Serafina treat you the way she did. For not standing up for you. I thought keeping peace meant keeping the family together. It didn't. It just hurt you. I didn't rush to fill the silence. He wasn't looking for comfort, he was confessing. He continued, his voice thin, haunted. I should have protected you. I should have listened. And now I need your help. What's going on? I asked, my voice flat, betraying nothing. I'm sick, he said. Cancer. Stage 4. They say it's been growing for a long time. I missed appointments. Didn't take things seriously. Serafina kept saying she had it handled. I believed her. He rubbed his face, a raw gesture of regret. I shouldn't have. I sat across from him, watching him carefully. Do you have a treatment plan? He shook his head, a single tear tracing a path down his cheek. No. Appointments haven't been booked. Medications are all over the place. I don't think she's trying to help me anymore. He looked at me straight, his eyes pleading. I don't think she wants me to get better. Nothing in his voice sounded dramatic or exaggerated. It was just the truth, cold and heavy, settling into the room. Then he said something I wasn't expecting. I need to get my affairs in order while I still can. I don't trust her with anything. Not my care, not the house, not the savings. I should have done this years ago. He met my eyes, a flicker of his old self. Help me fix what I can. I nodded once, the smallest agreement. Tell me what you want. Do you know anyone legal? He asked, his urgency clear. Someone who can move fast. I can't do this through her. I nodded again. Yeah, I do. Tonight, he said, his eyes wide. Before she realizes I'm gone. Tonight, I agreed. I'll make the call. Chloe met us at her office within 40 minutes. She looked between us, instantly reading the situation, no doubt. Mr. David, she said gently. Elijah told me you needed legal guidance. David nodded. I want to protect what little I have left. My house, savings, everything. I don't want Serafina touching it. My son should handle things when I'm gone. She brought out a stack of documents. First, let's confirm ownership of the house. She reviewed the deed. This is good. You bought it before the marriage, and she was never added to the title. It's in your name. That puts us in a strong position. David exhaled, a deep, shuddering sigh of relief. Good. I didn't want her taking it from Eli. Chloe continued, her voice clear and precise. In your condition, the best structure to protect your assets is a spendthrift trust. You'll choose a trustee, someone responsible to manage everything now and after you pass. There was no hesitation. Elijah, he said immediately, his voice stronger than it had been all night. He'll be the trustee. I shook my head slightly. Dad, you don't have to. I do, he interrupted, his eyes firm. This is my decision. You're the only one I trust. Chloe went through every line in plain terms. No loopholes, no confusion. David listened carefully, asked questions, and made sure he understood. Do you want to proceed? Chloe asked, finally. Yes, David said. Do it. He signed the papers with steady hands, a newfound resolve in his movements. When he finished, he leaned back in the chair, exhausted, but with a quiet satisfaction I hadn't seen in years. It's done, Chloe said. Your assets are now protected. She didn't stop there. She slid another set of forms forward. Medical power of attorney, a HIPAA release, and a healthcare proxy. This covers your care, she said. It makes sure the person you trust can talk to your doctors and make decisions if you can't. David didn't hesitate. He signed those, too. David closed his eyes for a moment, a profound weariness washing over him. Thank you, he whispered, a single word laden with decades of unspoken things. I wanted to leave something clean behind, not chaos. I put a hand on his shoulder, a silent promise. We'll handle everything from here. He nodded, his eyes still closed. Let's go home. When we pulled into the driveway, the house looked nothing like the one I grew up in. Wind chimes lined the porch. Colorful flags hung from poles. A wooden board by the door read, Healing Center. Positive vibrations only. West inside. She says, it keeps the house spiritually aligned. Inside, the smell of incense hit harder than the air outside. Crystals covered the coffee table. Bowls of herbs, salt, and candles were scattered everywhere. The kitchen counter was stacked with dirty mugs and mismatched pill bottles. This isn't healing, I said, a bitter taste in my mouth. This is neglect. A voice drifted from the hallway. David, is that you? Serafina stepped into the room wearing a layered shawl and holding a burning bundle of herbs. Her eyes widened when she saw me. Oh, she said, a flicker of surprise and annoyance crossing her face. Elijah returns. I brought him home, I said, my voice steady. She frowned at the folder sticking out of David's jacket. What's that? Legal documents, David said firmly, his voice surprisingly strong. My decision, not yours. She stiffened, her body language radiating hostility. Your energy is ruining the balance I created. I ignored her. Dad, let's get you resting. As I helped him sit, Serafina stood frozen, realizing too late that the control she'd held for years was already gone. And for the first time since childhood, David wasn't siding with her. He was siding with me. Over the next several weeks, David's health declined fast. Not overnight, just steadily, like something slipping downhill no matter how tight you hold the rope. I managed his appointments, medication schedule, meals, and pain control. Serafina insisted she should be included, but David had already signed medical paperwork, giving me legal authority over his care, access to his doctors, his treatment plan, and decisions if he couldn't speak for himself. When I reminded her of the treatment plan the doctor approved, she snapped, "You're blocking his energetic alignment." But she never followed through on any real care. Sometimes she left in the morning and didn't return until after midnight. Leo would wander around the hallway holding a stuffed bear by its arm, whispering, "Is mommy coming back?" I never had an answer. He stayed mostly in his room, peeking out when he heard voices. If Serafina walked past him without acknowledging him, he quietly closed his door. When I checked in on him, he'd ask things like, "Can you put me to sleep tonight?" Mommy forgets. I nodded every time and sat with him until he drifted off. While caring for David, I documented everything. Missed dozes when Serafina claimed she'd given them, her hours-long absences, the healing sessions she brought her friends in for, loud chanting, burning herbs, crystals placed around the bed instead of water or medication. She never checked if David was breathing properly. She never helped him sit up or drink. She never asked what he needed. She only complained that I was interfering with the spiritual space. One afternoon, while changing David's bed sheets, he looked at me with weak, fading eyes. "Thank you," he whispered, his voice barely audible. "For doing this. For everything." "You don't have to thank me," I said, a lump in my throat. He squeezed my hand, a surprisingly strong grip. I chose right about the trust. 3 days later, early in the morning, he was gone. Peacefully, with me sitting beside him. Serafina was nowhere in the house. Leo slept in the next room, unaware. I called the hospice nurse, then covered him with a clean blanket while we waited. When Leo woke up and saw me sitting quietly, he walked over slowly. "Is Dad sleeping?" I pulled him close, holding him tight. "Yeah, he's resting now." He wrapped his arms around me, small and tight against my chest. Serafina showed up an hour after the hospice van left. She walked in wearing a dramatic black shawl, smudged eyeliner like she'd been crying for days, a performative display. "You didn't call me," she shouted, her voice laced with outrage. "I should have been here to guide his spirit." "You weren't here all week," I said, my voice flat. She threw her bag down. "Because you kept blocking the energy. You kept poisoning the environment." Leo stepped behind me when she raised her voice. She noticed and glared, a pure venom in her eyes. The funeral took place 2 days later. Serafina arrived in head-to-toe black lace, waving at people as if she were hosting an event. The moment someone asked how she was holding up, she placed a hand on her chest and said, "I tried everything, but Elijah wouldn't let me heal him properly." Her parents stood beside her, both acting as though the house and finances now belonged to them. Her father whispered loudly to a relative, "Well, now things will finally be managed correctly." Her mother nodded, giving me a dirty look, a smug, satisfied sneer. Leo refused to stand next to Serafina. He grabbed my hand and stayed glued to my side. When Serafina tried to pull him toward her, he yanked his arm away, a small but defiant gesture. It embarrassed her in front of everyone, and she hissed, "You're confusing him." "No," I said, my voice low. "He knows who takes care of him." She clenched her jaw and turned away, fuming. After the funeral, we gathered at Chloe's office, the lawyers. Serafina and her parents walked in like they were preparing to collect a prize. She leaned back in her chair, arms crossed smugly. "Well," she said, a sneer on her face. "Let's get this done. David always promised he'd make sure I was taken care of." Chloe opened the folder, her expression unreadable. "Mrs. Serafina, I should clarify before we begin. Your husband established a spendthrift trust prior to his passing. He came voluntarily, was evaluated as competent, and signed of his own free will." Serafina frowned, her smugness faltering. "What are you talking about?" Chloe continued, calmly, deliberately. "The trust places the house and accounts under the management of the appointed trustee. And prior to his passing, David updated his beneficiary designations. His life insurance now pays into the trust." Serafina smirked, a flicker of her old confidence returning. "Which is obviously me." "No," Chloe said, her voice firm. "David chose Elijah." Her entire posture snapped forward, her face contorting. "He would never do that. Elijah manipulated him." Chloe, seated beside the attorney, spoke calmly, unflustered. "I was present for the signing. So was the doctor who verified his competency. David made every decision himself." Serafina's parents erupted. "This is illegal. This is fraud. He was pressured." Chloe slid the notarized documents forward, each page a heavy, undeniable truth. "Everything is fully recorded. There was no pressure. I didn't say a word. There was nothing to argue." Leo sat quietly beside me, feet swinging above the floor, clutching his bear. Before we came in, Chloe had made a call. Not to decide custody, that wasn't her job, but to make sure there were witnesses and a paper trail if Serafina tried to snatch Leo and disappear. There was already an open file. Hospice had flagged concerns weeks ago, and Serafina had been screaming in front of neighbors that she was taking her son whether anyone liked it or not. CPS agreed to send an investigator to the office because it was neutral ground and everyone was already here. When the subject shifted to custody, the temperature in the room dropped further, if that was even possible. The CPS investigator wasn't new to this family, it seemed. She opened her folder and summarized the reports. Elijah documented repeated instances of neglect, missed medications, prolonged absences, environmental hazards, and inappropriate reliance on non-medical rituals. We also have Leo's statements about being left unattended. Leo looked down, hugging his bear tighter, a silent confirmation. The investigator continued, her voice professional and firm. "Based on these findings and the existing case history, we're initiating an emergency safety plan today. Leo will remain with Elijah temporarily while the court reviews guardianship." Serafina shot to her feet, a feral scream escaping her lips. "He is my son. I am his mother. And the court will review formal guardianship," the investigator said, completely unfazed. "I filed for emergency guardianship that afternoon. Because the CPS case was already active, the clerk pushed it straight to the on-call family court judge. By late afternoon, I walked out with an emergency ex parte order. Temporary guardianship granted with a formal hearing date set for the following week. It wasn't permanent yet, but it was enough to keep Leo out of her reach. When I brought Leo home that night, he clung to me again and whispered, "Do I stay with you now?" "Yeah," I said, my voice thick with emotion. "You stay with me." He nodded into my shirt and didn't let go, his small body a warm weight against mine. As I carried him upstairs, Serafina stood at the bottom of the steps, shaking with pure, unadulterated rage. "This home is mine," she growled. "You will not take my son or my legacy." But legally, emotionally, and practically, she'd already lost both. Serafina and her parents refused to accept anything that happened in Chloe's office. From the moment we returned home, they acted like the trust didn't exist. They stayed in the house, slammed doors, shouted down the hallway, and told anyone who would listen that I had stolen everything. One morning, I stepped outside to throw out the trash and saw Serafina's mother talking to a neighbor. "It's all fraudulent," she hissed. "That boy tricked David when he was dying." Serafina joined her, raising her voice, a desperate, shrill cry for attention. "Elijah is brainwashing my son. He took my home, my child, my life." Leo peeked out the front door, saw them yelling, and immediately hid behind my leg. I put a hand on his shoulder. "Stay with me." The shouting continued as if we weren't standing there. Serafina pointed at me. "He's manipulating Leo. He's turning him against his own mother." Her father added, "Everyone knows David wouldn't choose him over real family." I stayed calm, my voice steady despite the rising chaos. "The trust is valid. Dad signed everything willingly. It's documented." Serafina marched up the walkway, her eyes blazing. "He was manipulated in his final hours. You stole his mind." Before I could respond, Chloe stepped out of her car and walked toward us, a calm, formidable presence. "Actually," she said, her voice cutting through the noise, "David was evaluated as fully competent. I've submitted sworn statements from the attending physician and the attorney." Serafina froze, then screamed, "Lies." Chloe didn't flinch. "There is no path where this ends the way you think it will." Inside, I pulled the door shut and locked it, the click a satisfying thud. Leo kept holding my sleeve, his small hand clutching tight. "Are they staying?" he whispered, his voice trembling. "For now," I said. "But not for long." I gathered every document I had. Trust paperwork. Medical logs. CPS findings. And the written threats Serafina had already screamed in front of witnesses. I took it straight back to Chloe. She didn't file a trespass complaint. She filed an emergency petition, a temporary protective order, and an order for exclusive possession of the residence tied to the active child welfare case. The clerk flipped through the attachments, paused on the CPS paperwork, then looked back up at me, a flicker of understanding in her eyes. "This goes to the on-call judge," she said. "You'll hear something fast." The next morning, the order was signed. Temporary. Immediate. Serafina and her parents were not allowed in the home, and they were not allowed near Leo. I drove home, parked across the street, and waited. When the sheriff's deputy pulled up for a civil standby, my stomach tightened with anticipation. A second car followed along with a locksmith. Serafina's parents burst out of the house like they could scare paperwork back into disappearing. Serafina shoved past him, shaking with raw, unadulterated rage. "Your father would never choose you over us." "He did," I said, my voice steady, betraying none of the turmoil inside. "And he signed it himself." Her father's face twisted, his jaw working like he wanted to argue with a uniform. "He didn't win that argument." "Ma'am, sir," the deputy lifted a hand, his tone calm but authoritative. "You've been served. This is a court order." Serafina's father shouted, "You can't do this. This is our son-in-law's home." The deputy didn't react. You need to leave the residence now. You may take essentials, medication, wallet, keys, phone, a change of clothes. Anything else will be scheduled for a supervised pickup. Serafina started yelling over him, but he kept his tone flat, unwavering. You have a short window to gather essentials. After that, you're out. This is my home. Serafina shouted, her voice cracking with fury. He stole everything. It was never yours, the deputy replied, his words like a cold slap. You have no legal right to remain here. They tried anyway, pure panic and spite fueling their movements. Serafina's mother reached for a lamp. Her father made a grab at a painting like he could yank the past off the wall. Stop, the deputy said immediately, his voice sharp. Essentials only. Personal documents, medication, clothes. That's it. Her father froze, jaw working like he wanted to argue with a uniform. He didn't win that argument. They dropped it, muttering curses at me. Leo pressed his face into my side and refused to look at them. Serafina rounded on me one more time, her eyes burning holes through me. You've ruined my life. You think you can just take my son? CPS placed him with me, I said, my voice steady. The court agreed. He's my child. He hasn't lived like he was, I replied, the truth hanging heavy in the air. She lunged forward like she wanted to grab Leo, but the deputy stepped between us, a solid, unmoving barrier. Ma'am, you need to finish gathering your things. She screamed, this isn't over. But it already was. The removal crew escorted them down the driveway and onto the sidewalk. They stood there clutching their bags, still screaming while I closed the front door. The silence that followed didn't feel triumphant. It just felt still. The locksmith changed the locks while the deputy watched. When the door clicked shut again, it sounded final. For the first time in years, the house wasn't vibrating with tension. Leo looked up at me, his eyes wide and innocent. Can we go now? Yeah, I said, a deep breath finally escaping my lungs. Let's get out of here. I spent the next week clearing out the incense bowls, crystals, trash bags, and piles of junk Serafina had brought in. I didn't keep anything that reminded me of her or the chaos she brought. The house wasn't a home. It was a reminder of every compromise David had made to keep peace. Once it was clean, I listed it for sale. Leo sat on the stairs watching me tape a small, for sale, sign to the front door. Are we moving far? He asked. Not too far, I said. Just somewhere better. He nodded, a small, knowing smile on his face. Good. We moved into a small apartment on the other side of town. Quiet building, clean hallways, nothing complicated. Within the first week, Leo started sleeping through the night. He ate more. He talked more. He laughed at cartoons. He followed me around the kitchen asking questions about everything. I filed the final guardianship paperwork the next month. The judge approved it without hesitation. One evening, while packing the last box from the house, Leo climbed into the passenger seat of my car and buckled himself in. He didn't say a word. He just looked at me, waiting. I turned the key. No speeches, no emotional last looks at the house. We drove away in silence, calm, steady, final. This time, the cycle ended. Looking back, I know I made the right choices. But I still wonder, in a situation like mine, what would you have done? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below, I'm reading every single one.